Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 8 of the Quarantine Daily Devotions. Yes, you heard that right. It is week 8. We are long into this thing that we're having to deal with, and sadly, I think it's only part of the entire length of how far this thing's going to go. But in the meantime, we're opening up the Bible together, and we'll see what God has to say to us during all of this. And today I want to spend a couple of minutes and I want to talk about the issue of bitterness and the solution to bitterness, which is forgiveness, and how God has a way of working through all of that. Because I think during this time, with all the relational challenges that people have, I think that tends to bring to mind a bunch of the relational junk that people tend to have, and broken friendships and harsh words and all of that stuff. And I think some people can get overwhelmed in this state of bitterness over what people have done to them and all the pain they've received, or maybe they're overwhelmed at what they've said and done to others. And friends, the answer to all of that is bitterness. So there's a woman who knows a whole lot about bitterness. Her name is Victoria Ruvolo, and she knows a whole lot about this because back in 2004, she was 44 years old driving down the street in New York. And to this day, she says she still doesn't remember seeing the silver Honda that was coming at her, nor did she see the 18-year-old boy hanging out the window, holding, of all things, a frozen turkey. And you may remember this from the news. He launched the frozen turkey at her windshield. It crashed through, a 20-pound turkey. It bent her steering wheel and smashed her face completely. It almost took her life. She spent a long time in the hospital and surgery after surgery, but they were able miraculously to save her and to kind of piece everything back together. 9 months later, she stood in a courtroom next to Ryan Cushing, the 18-year-old who had thrown the turkey through her windshield. And this is the moment. I mean, justice is about to be served, and Cushing had become the face of, at least for New Yorkers at the time, he had become the face of a generation of kids who had gone off the rails. And here he stood, and he's no longer the arrogant turkey thrower that he was. He's trembling, he's fearful, he's crying, and he is sorry for what he has done. And it's time for the sentence to be handed down, and the courtroom is packed. There's journalists and family and friends. They're ready for justice to be handed down. And when the judge read the sentence, the courtroom erupted because his sentence was only 6 months in jail and 5 years of probation. And people were very, very upset by all of that, but not Victoria Ruvolo, because the reduced sentence had been her idea. She had worked with the judge to bring the sentence down. And though the court around her is erupting in anger and disappointment, she walked over to Ryan Cushing, put her arms around him, and she said this, and I quote, "I forgive you. I want your life to be the best it can be." That's a great story. And we admire and appreciate people who can do that. But I think there's a part of us at the same time that thinks, how in the world could you do this? I mean, this kid, some stupid prank that he thought was cool and funny, almost ruined your life, almost took your life. And now you're going to suffer with consequences for the rest of your days. And here this is, he's getting really the equivalent of a slap on the wrist. How could you have orchestrated such a thing? But she had come to understand that bitterness will eat you alive, and she could nurse that wound, and she could hate him the rest of her life, but instead she decided to let it go and forgive him, and in so doing set herself free from having to feel that the rest of her life. And there's a guy in the Bible that understands this as well, more so than Victoria Ruvolo does, more so than any of the rest of us will ever know, because he endured pain unlike anything you and I will ever experience in life. His name is Joseph, and he shows up starting around Genesis 37, and really all the way through Genesis 50, the end of the book, is Joseph's story. And his story begins not with his own bitterness, but the bitterness of all of his brothers. He is the 11th of 12 children, and he is the favorite. And if you grew up in a home where one child was favored over another, you know the kind of bitterness that produces. So his dad loves him more than he loves his other kids because of the special relationship that his father had with his mother, and all there's all kinds of dysfunctional background things happening there. And he buys special gifts for Joseph. You know, the Technicolor Dreamcoat, that's one of them. And he certainly gets preferential treatment. And one day, Joseph has these dreams that his brothers, even his father, are going to bow to him. And you know, the family's not too thrilled about that. The older brothers, the father, they all kind of yell at him for that, but he sticks to his guns. Here's what I believe the Lord is telling me. There's a day coming that everybody's going to bow down to me. Well, they don't really like that. That kind of adds some insult to injury. And all the brothers are out tending the animals in the wilderness, and Dad sends Joseph to get them and check on them, deliver some food. Joseph gets out to them, and they see him coming from a distance. And they say, here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him. Well, one of the brothers, the wisdom prevails, and they decide not to kill him. They throw him in an empty cistern instead. So this hole in the ground, and they intend to leave him for dead. And they take the Technicolor Dreamcoat, they dip it in blood, and they go back and they tell Dad, hey, an animal got your favorite son, and we're sorry he's gone. All the while, they have sold him into slavery. There happens to be this caravan of slave traders going by. They sell him for some money, so that's better than killing him. At least they're getting something out of the deal. And Joseph is taken to Egypt, and he is sold at the auction block as property. But it just so happens that he's bought by a man named Potiphar. And Potiphar is the captain of the guard for all of Egypt. So he's like the highest ranking military general, oversees all the armies. And Joseph works hard. The Bible says that God's hand of favor is on Joseph. And he rises through the ranks, and he becomes second in command in Potiphar's home. Well, Joseph is a young, apparently good-looking young man, and he's responsible, and he catches the eye of a woman in the home. Sadly, the woman is Potiphar's wife, and she attempts to seduce him, and he maintains integrity, and he runs away. He says, I could never do such a thing, and she falsely accuses him of attempted rape, and that lands Joseph in prison. So there he is in prison. Bottom of the barrel there, it's as bad as it can get. He's an Israelite kid. He's a foreigner, now not just a slave, but he's in prison. He has no rights. There's nothing he can do. He's going to rot there in jail. But the text says the Lord is with Joseph in prison. He rises through the ranks, and he really kind of becomes in charge of the prison system, which, you know, that may sound good, but it's really not, because he's still a prisoner, so it's really not a good thing. And he has an opportunity to get out. There's a cupbearer and a baker that's down there with him that Pharaoh in Egypt has thrown into prison, and he tries to maneuver his way out, negotiate his way out of jail. Hey, tell Pharaoh about me. I'm here under false pretenses. And the cupbearer says, I will remember. I will tell him. And he forgets. And years go by, and Joseph's still rotting in prison. But then Pharaoh has a dream. And it just so happens that Joseph can interpret dreams, and that's what he had done for the cupbearer. And the cupbearer remembers, Pharaoh, there's a guy in prison who knows how to interpret dreams. He did that for me. You should call for him. So Pharaoh does, and Joseph interprets the dream about there's 7 years of plenty coming, then there's 7 years of famine coming, and it's going to be really, really bad. And Joseph offers a plan of how to handle the 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh is so impressed, puts him as second in command over all of Egypt. So now he is, with the exception of Pharaoh, he is the most powerful man in the world, because Egypt is running the world at this time. So he's a big deal, and he arranges for savings to happen for all the crops during the 7 years of plenty. And then in the famine, Egypt has food, and all has gone so well that everyone in the surrounding areas and the surrounding countries hear Egypt has food in this severe famine. Even Joseph's brothers hear there's food in Egypt. So their father sends them to Egypt and tells them, you need to get some of this food, bring back so that we can survive. And there's this powerful moment that the Bible orchestrates for us, where Joseph's brothers are now in Egypt, and they are begging for food for survival. And who are they asking? They're asking Joseph. They don't know it's him. He's grown up. He doesn't look the same anymore. And now here's this moment. Because think through Joseph's life. What has Joseph endured? He's betrayed by his own family. He's sold into slavery. He's falsely accused of this horrific crime against this woman that he didn't even do. He's been in prison. He rotted in prison for years. His life could end at any moment, surrounded by danger and filth and all the stuff that comes with that. And now he's elevated to this position. And who is it that caused all the problems in his life? It's the brothers' fault. They sold him into slavery. He lands in jail at the hands of Potiphar's wife, but ultimately it's the brothers' fault. All these bad things have happened. They were a domino effect, all because the brothers sinned against Joseph. And here he is in this moment where he has the power to bring ultimate justice against them. He can end their lives with a snap of his finger. He can do whatever he wants to do to them. And what does he choose to do? He chooses to forgive them. I mean, an unbelievable moment. He forgives and tells them, don't feel bad about what you've done. I release you of all the consequences of that. Because the brothers, when they find out it's Joseph, they are absolutely scared to death, because they think Joseph's going to kill him, because that's what they deserved. But he doesn't. So how could he do this? How could he find it in his heart? The phrase that we say, can you find it in your heart to forgive me? How could he do this? He did it because his focus wasn't on the wrong that they did to him. His focus wasn't even on them. His focus is on the God who rules over all things. He focused on the sovereignty of God. And he tells them, God sent me ahead of you so that I could arrange that there would be food for you to eat. So he's looking to God, saying, look at what God did in all of this. But it really comes to a head here at the very end of Genesis chapter 50, almost to the very end of the book. Chapter 50, verse 20, here's what Joseph says to his brothers. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. You meant evil. You tried to get me killed. You sold me off. You betrayed me. But God took that. He took the wrong that had been done. He took the pain that had been endured, and he turned it for his good purposes in the world. I mean, how incredible. I mean, that's Romans 8:28 in action, isn't it? That God takes all the bad things and he turns it for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That's what Romans 8:28 is talking about right here in Genesis 50. He takes the pain, the hurt, all of that stuff, and he turns it. Because by so doing, by orchestrating all that these brothers had done, God takes all of that, sends Joseph to Egypt, and enables him to get into such a place of power in the nation of Egypt that he now has the ability to save the nation of Israel by his works in Egypt. Though he's been a slave, though he's been in prison, that has enabled all of God's people, the entire family of faith, to be saved from this severe famine. God has bigger, ultimate plans for all things, including the pain that people inflict upon you and upon me. That's hard to deal with. But instead of looking at the person that hurt us, instead of focusing on the pain and the betrayal and all of it, instead, we can forgive by looking to the God who runs all things. We look to him who's in control. We look to him who has forgiven us. So we have this phrase, can you find it in your heart to forgive me? Is it in your heart to forgive someone? No, it's really not. It's not in mine either. But it's in God's heart, because he is the one who's forgiven us. He's the one who has saved us, even with all the pain we've brought to him, even with all the hurt that we have caused. He still has washed all of that away by faith in Jesus Christ. And now, because God's heart is forming in ours and is transforming ours, we now can look to him as the one who's producing good things out of bad, and we can look to the one who's forgiven us, therefore we can forgive. Friends, bitterness is a prison, and we don't want to live in that place, and there's only one way out of it. We look to God, the one who brings good out of bad, and the one who forgives those who do unspeakable things, because that's who he is and what he's done for us in the person and work of Jesus Christ, and how grateful we are. And that then is our response to the people around us, and that saves us from the brutality of bitterness in our own heart. So I hope that's been of help to you. I hope that's been a blessing to you, and we love you. Again, we miss you. Hope to see you again very, very soon. We'll see you again on Wednesday for another devotion. God bless.